Okay, I want to tell this guy's story. Nobody's telling it. His 41st birthday was June 23rd. The whereabouts of Shaw's traveling partner was Jolene. I wonder if I'm pronouncing that dog's name right. Jolene, the dog is unknown. We got to find this dog. Holy shit. There's this guy, and he died in the woods, and his dog is going around, and we have to find his dog. And his family wants to recover the dog as a way of remembering the late brother. Now, that's full of shit. Let me show you the story of Randy Shaw. And nobody really is speaking to men's rights or the reality of what's happening to a lot of men. Now, this guy here, Durango Herald, the overdose confirmed and homeless, was a man's death. It says Randy Shaw was found on the Animas River bank in May. I thought it was really interesting. Now, this is a classic example. It's happening everywhere. It's a homeless man. He was found dead. The body of Randy Shaw is a transient named in blah, blah, blah. And it says he had a fairly high, he had a drug problem, but he also had a story. And his story was that he was a veteran. See this? And he went over there, and I'm not sure, I've never been a veteran, but Randy Shaw was a veteran. And he basically just ended up living on the streets. And he was happy in his travel, and he suffered from drug addiction. And then he ended up dying. And then what was really interesting is that the family wanted to make sure that the dog was taken care of. And I thought that was really, really interesting. Because see, I'm sorry, you need some music? You don't like bad news? I don't either. You know, I got some news for you. What? You can't talk about that. These women are going to be offended. You're talking about saying fuck you to people. Okay. One of the things that I care a lot about on this channel is men's rights and the hashtag MRA and what happens to men in civil cases. That's something that I think there needs to be more attention to. What happens to men that go over and see combat, experience PTSD, and then ultimately just have to make it on their own. And who's speaking to the reality of the masculine journey for men? And who's using words, and who's really talking about suicide and the statistics, and who is suicide really affecting? And do we really have a drug problem, an alcohol problem, or do we have a men's rights problem? Like, for example, if we send a man, I'm just going to be hypothetical. I know this stuff doesn't really happen. But let's just say that we invade other countries illegally, and we send our men over there. They watch their buddies get blown up, and they're just kind of messed up. They need some rehab. They need 3 to 6 months of rehab. Well, what happens is, in most cases, these men come home and they're told to get robust resumes and just start working. And this is why, or part of the reason, that men die of suicide 3.5 times more than women. Now, you don't have to believe this number of $44 billion. You don't have to believe that suicide's affecting our economy $44 billion. And I started here because most people don't give a fuck about this. Most people don't really want to talk about suicide statistics honestly. They don't want to talk about it's the leading cause of death. Like, think about that. It's the 10th leading cause. 44,000 people die of suicide. Most of those people are men. And that it's costing our economy $44 billion. See, feminism would never tell you this piece of it, because can you imagine, let me just kind of put a pause here and I want you to think about it. Can you imagine if there was something that affected women 3.5 times, what if women died 3.5 times more of something than men? Can you imagine the outcry of that? Can you imagine the amount of federal protection and municipal level protection that women would encounter? Like, for example, I Googled this. This is a really interesting way of not only seeing the realities of alcoholism and the poison that alcohol is, but notice that even on the federal level, we don't just say 88,000 people die of something. No. Feminism says we need to break it down into 62,000 men, 26,000 are women. Think of that. That shows you the power of feminism. And I'm not against feminism, I'm just for equality. So isn't it interesting that feminism has said, when you report of a statistic, you need to let us know about these poor 26,000 women that are dying of alcoholism or alcohol-related causes. But see, Fibonojji would be like, yeah, but that's true. But 62,000 of these are men. And the real issue is alcohol is a poison, and this poison is affecting first men and then women. And then, of course, if you follow this channel, you know, I'm almost a lone advocate for equality, and I'm using the E word, equality, for men and women in civil cases. And who is speaking to equality in civil cases for men? In Texas alone, there's a law called Texas 2503 that assures that women cannot disrespect a man's custody. And it's never enforced, and as a result, there's millions of families that are torn apart because Texas 2503 is never enforced. You're like, okay, Fibonojji, you're all over the map. You're showing us some music. You're talking about alcohol-related deaths. You're talking about Texas 2503 again. You're talking about equality, which we all like the idea of that, but we don't actually want to do something. And I want to say, you know, let me show you what the reality of hashtag MRA looks like. It looks like this. It looks like veterans go see combat. They go through their own hashtag MRA experience. They die in the woods. Women are not dying in the woods with their dogs. Women are not losing their families in civil cases. Women are not as affected by suicide like men are. And when I talk about hashtag MRA, maybe I should just call it the 3.5 times statistic, because hashtag MRA involves more than civil cases and criminal cases. It's words like suicide, alcoholism, and we have to have, and it's time for us to have an honest conversation about the masculine journey in society. In feminism, there was a place for feminism. It's sad and almost unbelievable to admit that there was a time in this country that women couldn't vote. And there was a place for feminism to bring equality to the table. But now feminism has become such a Marxism that if a person stands up like I did and said, hey, I was in a civil case and I was trying to fight for my children so that I could have equal custody of my children, and I asked to be called the father because in the court documents, my wife was being called the mother and I was just called some sort of thing. I think they called me the respondent. I'm like, I'm not the respondent, I'm the father. When I asked for equality in my civil case in Texas, I was threatened with jail. And I'll close you with that note. Think about that. The hashtag MRA movement is so early and it's so infancy that I can show you a real life story that when a man shows up in a civil case and asks for equality, he's threatened with jail. Now that's not feminism, that's Marxism. You guys be good. Three and a half times suicide affects more than men. Affects men more than women. And I just thought this was the saddest thing. His own family cared more about the dog than they did about him, and they knew he was out here. And I just don't want this guy's story to be just another statistic. He's a real man. And which happens first? The overdose or the homelessness? And there I go again. Homelessness is a man's issue. Suicide is a man's issue. Civil cases and corruption in civil cases, it affects men. Women don't lose children. Men do. Rest in peace. I'm doing my best, buddy.